The scene begins with the view of Dmitri's lonely desk, a man who lives on memories and silence. The environment in which he lives seems to be a reflection of his own life, a slow existence with no room for new beginnings. The lamp on his desk emits a soft, almost flickering light, casting long shadows on the aged walls. He sits with trembling hands, holding a yellowed letter that arrived in the mail.
The letter, seemingly simple, carries immense weight. The environmental NGO that sent it asks for his collaboration in documenting the Chernobyl exclusion zone, where he, as a survivor of the disaster, has a crucial role to play. They want him to tell his story. But he knows that it is not just a matter of recounting historical events. The question he cannot answer is whether he is prepared to face again the nightmare he has been carrying for decades. He stares at the letter for a few seconds, as if trying to decipher a hidden message there. Dmitri's eyes shine with a mixture of nostalgia and fear. He looks around, the walls of his small apartment filled with old photos, some of friends who lost their lives, and others from a time he cannot leave behind. The camera zooms in on the letter in his hands, and as he slowly opens it, a sense of inevitability overwhelms him. In his eyes, the internal struggle is clear. Whether he accepts the invitation or not, the truth about what happened in Chernobyl will never leave him in peace. Dmitri arrives in the abandoned city of Pripyat. The train that brought him there dropped him off at a remote spot in the city, far from the hustle and bustle of life that existed here almost 40 years ago. The cold wind that cuts through the deserted streets makes the few pieces of paper on the ground dance, and the thick fog that covers the place seems to swallow the city. He observes what should be a thriving urban center, but is now reduced to a field of ruins. The silence is overwhelming, as if the city itself were experiencing the loneliness of a specter. Pripyat is frozen in time. Concrete buildings are covered in graffiti and cracks. Crushed trash cans and rusty bicycles are the only reminders of a life that once existed there. Dmitri, however, is not surprised. The sight of the city is a reflection of his own soul, crumbling and forgotten. The first stop is the playground, where broken toys are the last vestiges of an interrupted future. He stops, staring at the moss-covered swings and slides, and for a moment the city seems alive. He can almost hear the children playing, feeling the warmth of a time that no longer exists.
The apartment building where he lived with his family before the evacuation is visibly deteriorated. The doors are open, and the broken windows reveal emptiness. Dmitri enters his former home, feeling the dust accumulated in the air. He touches the walls of his former residence, trying to find something that connects his memory with what is now a ruin. But at the same time, he feels that there is nothing left there. His life before Chernobyl has disintegrated, just like the buildings around him.
Dmitri finally arrives at the entrance to the Chernobyl power plant. The huge complex is in ruins. The air is thick, and a sense of foreboding hangs over the place. He looks at the barbed wire fences, broken in places, and the warning signs lying on the ground, faded by time and radiation. The main building of the plant is a concrete monstrosity, corroded by the passage of time and the radiation that still seems to inhabit the place.
He walks slowly, the echo of his boots reverberating in the oppressive silence. As he enters the plant's lobby, the control systems and radiation monitoring monitors are covered in dust, as if they had been left behind at the time of evacuation. The emergency lights flicker erratically, and the air smells of mold and decay. Dmitri feels a chill run down his spine. This place is a time capsule, filled with memories he tried to forget.
As he walks through the corridors of the plant, the sounds of the distant city fade away, and the only sound he hears is the muffled sound of his own footsteps and the faint pulsing of the lamps. He enters an empty control room and looks at the operating tables. Everything is in disarray. Broken monitors, papers scattered on the floor, and a sense of desolation hangs in the air. He can almost hear the screams of his colleagues, the panic that gripped the plant when it all happened.
Dmitri begins to have vivid flashbacks of the day of the explosion, as if he were reliving the chaos for a second time. He finds himself in a narrow corridor of the plant, surrounded by coworkers, all with pale faces of panic and confusion. The sound of alarms begins to echo through the corridors, and the tension mounts. Dmitri tries to process the situation, but his mind is overwhelmed by the chaos. He rushes to help, but doesn't know what to do. Radiation is everywhere, and no one has a clear plan. He feels the weight of responsibility on his shoulders as the others search for a way to escape.
The camera moves frantically, quickly passing over Dmitri and his colleagues, distorting time and creating a sense of panic and despair. Images from the past blend with the present, becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish. Dmitri tries to remember what happened, but the images of the disaster become blurred, and he loses control over events.
Dmitri begins to walk through the corridors of the plant, his heart racing as if he were being followed by something invisible. The air becomes thick, and he senses that something is about to happen. The silence of the plant is disturbing, but he still hears distant footsteps, as if someone were behind him. He turns quickly, but there is no one there.
As he moves through the dark corridors, the sound of his own breathing mingles with whispers that seem to come from the walls. He stops in front of a door and sees a figure at the end of the corridor, a man with his back turned, with the unmistakable silhouette of one of his co-workers who died in the explosion. Dmitri tries to call out to him, but his voice fails him. He stands frozen, his eyes fixed on the figure, who begins to turn slowly.
The man is disfigured, his face almost unrecognizable due to radiation. His eyes are deep-set, empty, but there is still something in his gaze that seems to blame Dmitri, as if waiting for an explanation. Dmitri takes a hesitant step forward, his mind in conflict. He tries to approach, but the figure dissolves like smoke, disappearing before his eyes.
He can't understand it. Is he seeing things? Or was what he experienced that day so traumatic that now everything is blurring together? Psychological terror begins to take over his mind. The images become distorted. Reality seems to crumble. He looks again at the hallway, where shadows begin to lengthen and twist in a supernatural way, forming human figures that watch him but remain motionless, like specters.
After the disturbing glimpses of his dead colleagues, Dmitri finds a partially destroyed control room. The room is drenched in silence. The floor is covered with aged papers and pieces of broken technology. Dmitri enters cautiously, his body heavy with physical and emotional pain, as if the weight of guilt itself were tied to him.
He approaches a central table where an old file rests, covered in dust. The folder is gray, with his name written on it in almost imperceptible letters. He slowly opens the file, his fingers trembling, and begins to read the papers that tell a horrible story. The first pages talk about radiation exposure and medical procedures that were never followed. The following pages detailed the amount of radiation he and other workers were forced to absorb without any protective equipment. But as he reads, he comes across a sentence that paralyzes him. Priority ignored.
He lets the papers fall from his hands, and the room around him seems to grow tighter, as if the walls are closing in. He feels a terrible weight on his chest. He was told he should have been removed from the site because of high radiation levels, but he wasn't. He begins to realize that his survival wasn't luck. It was a failure. He was ignored, discarded by a system that treated him like a spare part.
As guilt begins to creep into his mind, images of his dead colleagues return, more vivid than ever. He sees himself again in that moment, working under the constant threat of radiation, knowing that nothing could save them, but still pushing them to continue like machines. They are the ghosts now, haunting the room, watching him with accusing eyes. The voices begin to blend together, and he feels himself being consumed by guilt, by something he can no longer escape.
Dmitri, completely immersed in his thoughts and emotions, finds himself in an even darker and more oppressive corridor. The environment is silent, and the feeling of being watched never goes away. He feels that something is lurking, waiting for him. He feels the cold increasing around his body. When he looks ahead, he sees a broken door. He approaches it, and upon entering, he comes across a large mirror, now cracked, reflecting his image in a distorted way.
But what he sees in the mirror is not the tired old man he has become. He sees the young man he was back then, the one who ran through the power plant without knowing what was happening, the one who unwittingly became an accomplice to the deaths of his friends. In the reflection, he observes his face from 1986, and in the background, the figures of his dead colleagues begin to emerge, clearer, more real.
The mirror distorts even further, and now he sees not only his own image, but the images of all those who have died. Each face is marked by radiation, but their eyes are alive, accusatory. Dmitri's reflection begins to scream silently, the words he never said echoing inside him. "You killed them." The weight of the words crushes him.
He tries to walk away, but the mirror won't let him. He tries to look again, but the faces of his dead colleagues are all he sees. He realizes he never escaped the disaster. Chernobyl never left him. He is trapped in this space, in this time. The shock of the reflection is like a knife in his chest, cutting him from the inside out.
Dmitri finally leaves the plant, but the weight of guilt and memories of Chernobyl still haunt him. He walks through the deserted streets of Pripyat, but his gaze is empty. The city seems darker now, and the feeling that the disaster never left him consumes him. He looks at the plant one last time, but the peace he hoped for does not come.